My mother-in-law claimed I was too poor for her son, until she discovered I owned her house. "You're just a gold digger who trapped my son," she sneered at me during Thanksgiving dinner. I smiled sweetly and pulled out the deed to her house. "Actually, you've been living in my property for 3 years. Rent's due." The entire room went silent. My mother-in-law Patricia's face turned from smug satisfaction to complete shock, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how I, Sophia Martinez, a girl from the wrong side of town, ended up owning my wealthy mother-in-law's house without her knowing it. I met Daniel at a coffee shop where I worked while putting myself through business school. He was different from the usual tech bros who ordered their triple-shot ventis while barely looking up from their phones. Daniel actually talked to me, asked about my studies, and seemed genuinely interested in my opinions. He never made me feel like just a barista. What he didn't mention during our early dates was that his family came from old money. The Walkers had been in real estate for generations, and Patricia Walker née Ashford came from an equally wealthy family. I only discovered this when he finally took me to meet his parents 6 months into our relationship. The Walker mansion was intimidating, a colonial-style house with perfect gardens and a circular driveway that probably cost more than my entire college education. Patricia answered the door wearing pearls and an expression that could freeze hell over. "So, you're the little coffee girl," she said, not even inviting me in properly. Throughout dinner, she interrogated me about my family, my education, my prospects. When she learned my father was a mechanic and my mother cleaned houses, her nose wrinkled like she'd smelled something rotten. "Daniel, darling," she said, completely ignoring me. "The Pemberton girl is back from Switzerland. Such an accomplished young woman. Did you know she's working at her father's firm now?" But Daniel held my hand under the table and defended me at every turn. His father, Robert, was kinder but clearly under Patricia's thumb. Despite her obvious disapproval, Daniel and I continued dating. He proposed 2 years later, and Patricia nearly had a stroke. "I'll never accept this gold digger into our family," she told Daniel. "She's after our money. Mark my words, she'll ruin you." What Patricia didn't know was that I'd graduated summa cum laude with a degree in finance and had started a small investment firm with a fellow graduate. While she was planning society lunches, I was building a portfolio. While she was gossiping about appropriate matches for her son, I was closing deals. The wedding was small. Patricia made sure of that. She told everyone who'd listened that her son was making a mistake, that I'd trapped him, that I'd be pregnant within months to secure my claim to the Walker fortune. The joke's on her. Daniel and I both wanted to establish our careers before having children. 3 years into our marriage, something interesting happened. Patricia and Robert fell on hard times. Robert had made some bad investments, over-leveraged their assets, and suddenly the mighty Walkers were facing bankruptcy. They hid it well, keeping up appearances, but Daniel found out when his father came to him for a loan. That's when I made my move. Not out of spite. Well, not entirely, but because I saw an opportunity. Through my company, I set up a shell corporation and bought their mortgage from the bank. The bank was happy to offload it, given Robert's declining credit. The shell company then offered the Walkers a deal. Stay in the house, pay reduced rent, and maintain their lifestyle without anyone knowing they'd lost their home. Patricia was so desperate to keep up appearances that she didn't look too closely at the paperwork. Robert was just relieved to avoid public humiliation. They signed everything, believing they were dealing with a kind investor who understood their need for discretion. For 3 years, they lived in my house. Patricia continued her snide comments about my poor background and how I wasn't good enough for her son. She'd make jokes at family gatherings about how some people just don't belong in certain circles. She'd criticize my clothes, my career, even the way I held my fork at dinner. "It's just not natural," I overheard her telling her sister once. "A girl like that with my Daniel. She must have trapped him somehow. Probably told him she was pregnant." Meanwhile, my investment firm had grown into a multi-million-dollar company. I'd bought several properties, invested in tech startups, and built a portfolio that would make most Wall Street bros weep with envy. But I kept it quiet. I wore modest clothes, drove a Honda, and let Patricia believe I was still the coffee girl, trying to social climb. Daniel knew about my success. We shared everything. But he didn't know about his parents' house. That was my secret, my ace in the hole for when Patricia finally pushed too far. That moment came at Thanksgiving dinner 3 years later. Patricia had invited the entire extended family, including her horrible sister Margaret and several cousins who'd always looked down on me. She sat me at the far end of the table, away from Daniel, between two elderly aunts who spent the entire meal talking over me. During dessert, Patricia clinked her glass for attention. "I have an announcement," she said, smiling that cold smile of hers. "Margaret's daughter Jennifer has just gotten engaged to Harrison Blackwell. You know, the Blackwells who own half of downtown? Such an appropriate match. It's so important to marry within one's class, don't you think?" She looked directly at me. Of course, not everyone understands the importance of breeding and background. Some people think they can just insert themselves where they don't belong. "Mother," Daniel warned, but Patricia wasn't done. "I'm just saying, darling, that when you come from nothing, you tend to contribute nothing. Look at Jennifer. She brings assets, connections, breeding. That's what a real wife does. Not everyone can claim that, can they, Sophia?" The room was thick with tension. Several relatives smirked, enjoying the show. This wasn't the first time Patricia had publicly humiliated me, but something in me snapped. 3 years of insults, 3 years of being called a gold digger while she lived in MY House. "You're absolutely right, Patricia," I said calmly, reaching into my purse. "Contributing assets is important in a marriage. Speaking of which, I have something for you." I pulled out the deed to her house and slid it across the table. "Since we're talking about contributions and assets, I thought you should know that you've been living in my property for the past 3 years. Every rent check you've written, it's been going to my company." Patricia laughed, but it was nervous. "Don't be ridiculous. This is our family home." I corrected. "Until Oakwood Investments bought it from the bank 3 years ago. Oakwood Investments, which is wholly owned by SM Capital, which is wholly owned by me." I pulled out more papers. "Here are your rental agreements. Here are the bank documents. Here's the transfer of deed. And here," I smiled sweetly, "is an eviction notice. You have 30 days. The room exploded. Patricia snatched the papers, her hands shaking as she read through them. Robert had gone pale, swaying in his seat. The relatives were buzzing with shock and gossip. "This is impossible," Patricia shrieked. "You're lying. You trapped us somehow." "The only trap," I said, standing up, "was the one you set for yourselves. You were so eager to hide your bankruptcy, so desperate to maintain appearances, that you didn't even check who was buying your debt. You just assumed some coffee girl could never outsmart the great Walker family." Daniel stood up beside me, taking my hand. He'd known this moment was coming. I'd told him everything the night before. "How could you, Mother?" he asked quietly. "All these years, Sophia has been nothing but gracious while you've treated her like dirt. She could have thrown you out years ago, but she let you keep your dignity. And this is how you repay her." "I want you out," Patricia screamed at me. "Get out of my house." "Your house." I laughed. "Patricia, you haven't owned this house in 3 years. Every holiday dinner, every society party, every moment you've spent looking down on me, you've done it in MY House. I bought this place to help you, to let you save face. But since you can't show basic respect to the woman who saved you from homelessness, we're done." I turned to Robert, who looked devastated. "I'm not heartless. I'll give you 60 days instead of 30, and I'll provide references for rental applications. But the free ride is over." As Daniel and I left, Patricia was still screaming, alternating between calling me a liar and begging me to reconsider. The relatives who'd smirked at her insults were now whispering about the scandal. Margaret was already on her phone, probably spreading the gossip to everyone who'd listen. The next morning, Patricia called Daniel, sobbing and apologizing. She begged for forgiveness, promised to change, swore she'd accept me as family. But it was too late. Respect isn't something you grant when someone holds power over you. It's something you show regardless. We let them stay the full 60 days, during which Patricia tried everything from love-bombing me with gifts to threatening legal action. Her lawyer quickly informed her that everything I'd done was completely legal. She'd signed the contracts. She'd cashed the checks. She'd lived in my house while calling me a gold digger. They moved to a modest apartment across town. The society circles Patricia had cultivated for decades suddenly became very busy when she called. Funny how quick people are to distance themselves from scandal. Daniel and I bought a new house. Our house, chosen together, decorated together, filled with mutual respect and love. We have Sunday dinners there now, just the two of us and the friends who've always accepted me for who I am. Patricia still sends Christmas cards, trying to rebuild bridges. Sometimes I almost feel sorry for her. She spent so much time worried about breeding and background that she never bothered to see the person right in front of her. She was so convinced I was after the Walker money that she never realized I was building my own empire. But then I remember all those dinners where she humiliated me, all those snide comments about my family, all those times she tried to break up my marriage. And I remember that respect is earned, not inherited. The last I heard, she was working as a receptionist at a real estate firm, her first job at age 63. Robert found work as a consultant, using his connections while they still meant something. They're surviving, which is more than they would have managed without those 3 years in my house. As for me, SM Capital just closed another major acquisition. My parents are enjoying their early retirement in the beach house I bought them. Daniel's practice is thriving. We're even thinking about children, kids who'll grow up knowing that worth isn't measured by your last name or your zip code, but by how you treat others. Sometimes karma takes its time. Sometimes you have to help it along. And sometimes, just sometimes, the best revenge is letting someone dig their own grave while you quietly own the shovel and the land they're digging in. The deed to the Walker house? I had it framed. It hangs in my office, a reminder that the best response to, "you don't belong here," is to buy the whole damn place. After all, nothing says I belong quite like being the landlord.